Good afternoon. How are you? That's our witness?
Yes, sir.
All right, you stand right there for a second, and let's bring in the jury. All right, state, who is your next witness?
State calls Angie Vassalotti, Your Honor.
Ms. Vassalotti, good afternoon. If you do me a favor, raise your right hand and face Damien over here.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the evidence you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
All right, you're gonna have a seat right up here. Watch your step. It can be tricky. The chair swivels, it rolls, and get it where you're comfortable. But the most important thing for me is that microphone. So the whole bit, yep, you know, that get it close, even a little closer. Either move the microphone, yeah, perfect. Now tell us your full name and slowly spell your last name for us.
My name is Angie Vassalotti. That's Vassalotti.
You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon.
How long, back in 2015, how were you employed?
I was a senior forensic scientist for the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office in the Forensic Biology Unit.
And when did you stop working as a senior forensic biologist for the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office, ma'am?
March 30th, 2018.
And since that time, have you moved on to doing private consulting?
Yes.
Now, prior to the time that you entered into the private world, what is your training, experience, and education?
I have a bachelor's in science from Florida Atlantic University in Boca Raton in biology. I have a master's of science in pharmaceutical sciences with a concentration in forensic serology and DNA from the University of Florida. Once I became employed by the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office, I underwent a very structurized and strenuous training program that lasted over a year that encompassed everything from serology, which is identification of body fluids, and DNA, taking samples on through the DNA process, statistical analysis, report writing, and testifying in court.
And how long were you employed by the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office?
A little bit over a year, or 9 years, sorry.
9 years?
Yes.
And what were your duties as a senior forensic scientist for the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office?
My duties included obtaining items or evidence from crime scenes and analyzing them through serology, identifying any biological fluids such as blood and semen, and then taking samples on sometimes swabbing items for touch DNA, preserving those items for the DNA process, and then taking those items on through the 4 steps of DNA, obtaining profiles, comparing, writing reports, testifying, along with other duties such as helping training new analysts and validations in the laboratory and other miniature, admin duties like that.
And are you board certified?
I am certified, yes.
As far as accreditation, your lab was accredited during the entire time that you worked there, is that correct?
Yes,
And you'd go through an annual review to maintain that accreditation?
correct.
And I say obviously, but the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office continue to maintain that accreditation throughout your entire tenure there?
Yes.
And as far as proficiency goes, if you would just describe proficiency for an individual and what you had to go through to remain proficient.
Proficiency tests is a name given to tests given by a third party to analysts. So we're given it's like a little exam basically, and it's biannually, so every 6 months. A third party will give us some samples, which they know the answers, and that encompass both serology and DNA. And at the end, we have to get the correct answers, the correct profile. And then those get submitted to that third party as well.
And you maintain your proficiency throughout your tenure, ma'am?
Yes.
And did you also employ the use of controls and DNA analysis?
Yes.
And if you would just explain that briefly?
Controls are samples that are run along with the evidentiary samples. So there's a negative control. So a negative control is just, the way that it sounds, there's no DNA in there. So there should be no DNA because the steps are quite lengthy and it can take numerous times. So at the end of the process, that profile there should be no profile in there, along with a positive control. So there's a positive sample that has a DNA profile that we know should be there, and at the end of the steps, it should be there. And that just gives an ability to make sure that the reagents or the chemicals that we are using are free of any spurious DNA.
And have you testified as an expert before, ma'am?
Yes.
How many times?
Between depositions and trial, about 40 times.
And the nature of your work in performing DNA analysis, what types of evidence do you analyze or have you analyzed?
Evidence come in all different forms, basically anything that you can touch, weapons, hammers, to swabbing of items. So cars that are swabbed, obviously we can't put a car or a mattress into the laboratory, so those are swabbed outside of the laboratory. But basically anything that can contain any sort of biological fluid or epithelial cells or touch DNA.
And you just touched on something important there. You don't necessarily receive these large items of evidence for your analysis most of the time, do you?
Correct.
You receive swabs taken from the pieces of evidence which may or may not contain some type of DNA.
Correct.
And about how many times, let's say, how many samples have you performed DNA analysis on throughout your career?
I would say well over 1,000 samples.
And so let's just talk a little bit about DNA generally. And you talked about DNA potentially being present, but what is DNA? And how does it differ from person to person?
DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid, and it's basically the blueprint of our bodies. We get half of our information from our mothers and the other half from our fathers. And it tells what color hair we're going to have, what color eyes we're going to have, how tall we're going to be. It's individual to us alone. The only people who have the same identical DNA profile are identical twins. Other than that, your DNA profile is your own.
So the DNA profile that you establish is unique to each person outside of the extreme exception of identical twins.
Correct.
And if you would, how does touch DNA differ from, let's say, blood or semen?
So touch DNA is DNA that's left from our skin. So when we handle items, our DNA comes off of our skin. And we're not talking about the top layer of DNA or of skin because those cells are dead and the DNA is not viable for the DNA process. But what we're talking about are the layers underneath that dead skin, which we can deposit on items. There's there's many different factors, but the 4 factors I like to talk about when depositing DNA on touch items is the length of time that the item is held, the surface of the item. So sometimes items are very smooth, as opposed to something that's rough. Something that's rough is going to allow you to deposit your DNA quicker. The person itself, some people are what's called, through research, shedders. They deposit their DNA more readily than others. And then the third, those are the 3 that I like to speak about.
So some people are actually shedders and actually just leave their DNA much more than others.
Yes.
And as far as DNA analysis, what uses are there for DNA analysis?
DNA, other than forensic uses, has research uses. So they use DNA for research in cancer, pharmaceuticals. It's used, I'm sure some of you have heard of Ancestry.com. So to find ancestors, a lot of studies from Incan and Mayan sort of ancestors, and also massive disasters like 9/11 or plane crashes, things like that, to identify people.
And unfortunately, television has made it appear that the analysis of DNA can take obviously less than 60 minutes. What is the reality?
Yes, so the reality is not that. DNA is a lengthy process. It takes, days to create these profiles. And then at the end, we're not given, here's the picture of the person. Some of our profiles are inconclusive. Sometimes our samples don't contain any DNA. So it is very different than And then also, we don't go out into the crime scene. A lot of the shows, the person goes out into the crime scene and then does all of the detective work as well. It's not like that. We are in the laboratory, the evidence comes to us, we process them, we give the report out.
So you're not a crime scene investigator or a detective, you're a forensic scientist.
Correct.
And in addition to that, do you also have an open case backlog and a large number of cases that were open at any time at the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office?
Yes.
And did the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office lab solely service the Sheriff's Office, or did it also service other agencies?
Yes, over 20 agencies.
And throughout the county?
Yes.
Is it safe to say that there's a backlog of cases to even getting started regardless of when you receive the items?
Yes.
And let's go through the actual process of analysis when you receive something to begin analyzing it for the presence of DNA and also comparison.
There are 4 steps in the DNA process. So once the serology part has happened and all the samples are preserved for this case, they go on to the 4 steps. So the first step is extraction, which is opening up those cells in that swab or the cutting of the item in some chemicals, and it opens up the cells and it releases the DNA that's in each little sample. The second step is quantitation, and that tells us, do we have DNA, human DNA in that sample? And if so, how much do we have? And then the third step is amplification, and that's taking that small amount of DNA and multiplying it millions of times so we can visualize it in the 4th step, which is DNA profile visualization. After that, we can make our comparisons and then write our report.
And then what's the significance of that information that you obtained through the analysis?
We can use it for inclusions or exclusions if the profile it has enough information.
So once you actually develop this profile from potential DNA evidence, then you can compare it to other known individuals' profiles to see whether or not they are included or excluded from whatever DNA evidence that you're looking at.
Correct.
Basically to see whether it's their DNA on an object or not.
Correct.
And what are protocols?
Protocols are step-by-step procedures that as analysts we have to follow. They're kind of like, they can go anywhere from how to make a reagent, so similar to like a recipe, and it tells you how much of each chemical to add, all the way to how to write your report.
And did you analyze evidence that was submitted to you in PBSO case number 15-133920?
Yes.
Did you follow the protocols in that case?
Yes.
And did you conduct DNA analysis on items of evidence that you received pursuant to that case?
Yes.
And did you compare those DNA profiles that were developed from pieces of evidence to DNA profiles from standard samples?
Yes.
And if you would, what is a standard profile?
A standard profile is a sample taken from an individual. So an oral swab is taken from the cheeks of an individual, or if the person is deceased, blood is drawn from the person. So we know that the profile that we get is the profile of that individual.
And did you prepare reports of your findings throughout your analysis of pieces of evidence in this case, ma'am?
Yes.
So let's discuss some of those submissions and also the analyses you performed, along with any conclusions that you reached. You wrote multiple reports in this case, is that correct?
Yes.
And let's begin with a report dated October 28th of 2015. In that report, did you receive multiple submissions for potential analysis?
Yes. Is it okay if I look at my report?
Please do. As long as it helps refresh your recollection of the analysis that you performed and the conclusions you reached.
Okay.
And pursuant to that report, did you receive submission 8, an oral standard from a Nouman Raja?
Yes.
Did you know Mr. Raja prior to conducting these analysis?
No.
Did you also receive submission 34, swabs from a copper-colored defect on a pistol?
Yes. Yes.
Also, submission 39, a blood standard from a Mr. Corey Jones.
Yes.
Had you ever met Mr. Jones prior to this analysis or any of the analysis that you performed?
No.
Submission 52A, swabs from a pistol box.
Yes.
Submission 54A and B, swabs from a left front door exterior.
Yes.
And even though you might have one submission number, do you also break those down into subparts labeled by letters such as A, B, and C, depending on the actual part of an object that is swabbed?
Yes. Sometimes items are brought in. There's one package, and within that package, when you open it, there's two sets of swabs. Or two sets of envelopes containing swabs. So then if the outside packaging is submission 52, then the first package or envelope of swabs would be 52A, and the second one would be 52B.
55A and B, which were swabs from a right front door exterior.
Yes.
57A, which is swabs from a hood.
Yes.
58A, swabs from a glove box handle.
Yes.
59A, B, C, and D, which are all swabs from different parts of a Hemnes Arms Pistol.
Yes.
And submission 62, swabs from a BLS on a pistol slide pertaining to that same Hemnes Arms Pistol. Is that correct?
Yes.
And BLS, does that stand for blood-like substance?
Yes.
There you go. So let's talk about the conclusions that you reached in regards to your analysis of those submissions. From submission 34, the swabs from the copper-colored defect on the pistol, did you obtain the source of a DNA profile?
Yes.
Who was that?
Corey Jones is the source of the DNA profile obtained from the copper-colored defects on the pistol.
And then submission 52A, swabs from a pistol box. What were your conclusions?
A DNA profile was obtained and indicates the presence of two individuals. Corey Jones is a source of the major DNA profile, and Nouman Raja is excluded as a contributor to the minor DNA profile.
And let's discuss that. So when you obtain a DNA profile from some swabs, can it contain more than one person's profile?
Yes.
And in this case, you list it as a major DNA profile and a minor DNA profile. Can you explain a little bit what the difference of that is, please?
When we visualize the DNA, when it comes out of that fourth step, which is DNA visualization, it comes out in form of peaks, so like an EKG. So sometimes we examine 16 areas of the DNA. So we don't look at the entire DNA genome. We look at 16 areas that are known to be different between individual to individual. So when we look at these peaks, sometimes we can see that some of them are much higher than others. There's some peaks that are very tall. And then there's some shorter peaks. And the taller peaks show intensity, which is correlated to amount of DNA deposited. So if someone has deposited a lot of their DNA, then their peaks are going to be very tall. So we can decipher and separate those DNA profiles and say that all of these peaks are from that same DNA profile, the same individual, and that's the major DNA profile. And then the remaining peaks, if it's a two-person profile, then those would be the minor contributor.
And so kind of a layman's way of putting it, if somebody leaves more DNA on an object, they could be the major. If somebody leaves less, they could be the minor.
Correct.
Submission 54A, which is the left front door exterior handle. What were your findings?
Corey Jones is the source of the DNA profile obtained.
54B, swabs from left front door exterior.
A DNA profile was obtained and indicates the presence of at least two individuals. No DNA data eligible for a statistical calculation was developed. The statistical significance of the DNA mixture cannot be determined. As a result, the conclusion regarding Corey Jones as a possible contributor is inconclusive. And then Nouman Raja is excluded as a contributor.
So from the left front door exterior, Nouman Raja would be excluded. However, you had a mixture of DNA on that exterior swab, is that correct?
That's correct.
So explain what a mixture is, if you would, and also why you might have some type of inconclusive result.
A mixture is a profile that's of more than one individual. So we look at 16 areas of the DNA, like I said. You have a piece from your mother and a piece from your father. So at most, there should be 2 pieces of information at one area. If there's any more than that, we know that we're dealing with another individual. So in this instance, there was at least 2 individuals in this profile. An inconclusive profile is a profile that does not qualify for statistical analysis. I can't put any weight to that, I can't put any weight to the profile because it's either partial, meaning that there wasn't enough DNA, there's peaks here, but in this other areas, there's no information at all, which then tells me that I have dropout, some information is dropping out. So things like that can make the profile not eligible for a statistical calculation, meaning that it's excluded or inconclusive. There's still some information there that I can make comparisons. So in this instance, Nouman Raja is excluded from the information that I did get, but the profile that I did get was not of good quality, so therefore it's inconclusive.
So you know that there's more than one person present, is that correct?
Correct.
And that's why it's a mixture. You could exclude Nouman Raja, so you can't exclude people from mixtures even if it's not of the quality for statistical analysis.
Correct.
But you could not make a conclusion regarding Corey Jones being a possible contributor.
Correct.
So based on your analysis, you don't know if that mixture of DNA contained Corey Jones or didn't contain Corey Jones.
Correct.
Submission 55A from the right front door exterior handle. And so this is going to now be on a passenger side exterior handle. What was your result?
A DNA profile was obtained at 9 genetic markers. Corey Jones and Nouman Raja are excluded as contributors.
So even though it was only a 9 marker profile, you were able to exclude both Corey Jones and Nouman Raja.
Correct.
Swabs from the right front door exterior, 55B. What were
Corey-
your results?
Corey Jones is the source of the DNA profile obtained.
And then 57A, swabs from the hood.
A DNA profile was obtained and indicates the presence of at least 2 individuals. Corey Jones, again, is inconclusive. The profile is inconclusive, but Nouman Raja is excluded as a contributor.
Now, when you receive swabs like this, it says, it's titled swabs from hood, is that correct?
Correct.
Do you know whether or not those swabs are from maybe like the front of the hood where somebody would hold it up if they're working on their car? Or do you know if it's from like the flat middle of the hood?
If all I have is hood, then I have no other indication of where it came from.
Either way, you make your analysis and your comparison.
Correct.
58A, swabs from the grips and trigger from a Hemnes Arms Pistol.
59A.
I'm sorry, swabs from the glove box handle, 58A.
Corey Jones is the source of the DNA profile obtained.
And then now moving to a pistol, and I'm going to show you for purposes, and this is states 19A, so that we can understand the parts of a firearm that we're talking about when we're talking about different aspects of these swabs. So for 59A, they're swabs from the grips and trigger from a Hemnes Arms Pistol, correct?
Correct.
And so when we're talking about from grips and trigger, are we referring to this black portion as the grips, as you would understand?
Yes.
And then this black portion right here as the trigger, as you would understand?
Correct.
And I'm not saying that you actually saw the specific firearm. You had swabs from a firearm, correct?
Correct.
And so on 59A, 59, which are swabs from the grips and trigger, 59B are the front and rear sights, correct?
Correct.
And so that would be the front sights being on the end of the gun or near the barrel, and then the rear sights being near the back of the slide, is that correct?
Correct.
And then 59D, which are swabs from magazine and 6 live rounds from a Hemnes arm. So that would be, if a magazine was inserted into the handle, that would be from the magazine and the actual bullets contained within that magazine.
Correct.
And did all of those, your analysis for all of those submissions have the same conclusion and results?
Yes.
And what was that?
A DNA profile was obtained and indicates the presence of 2 individuals. The profile was inconclusive for Corey Jones, and Nouman Raja is excluded as a contributor.
So regardless of who this belonged to, through your analysis of those parts, you couldn't say whether or not Corey Jones's DNA is on there, but you could say that Nouman Raja's was not.
Correct.
And then moving to submission 59C, swabs from the slide. And so now we're talking about this top part here, which is the slide of the firearm. Is that correct?
Correct.
And then what were the results there?
A DNA profile was obtained and indicates the presence of 2 individuals. Corey Jones and Nouman Raja are excluded as contributors, and a major male DNA profile was deduced.
And did you make any further findings of that major male DNA profile?
I was asked if it could possibly be a relative, and at the time, I believe I said that it was possible that it could have been a relative to Corey Jones.
So it could be familial to Mr. Corey Jones, is that correct?
That's correct.
And then looking at submission 62, which is swabs from BLS on a pistol slide belonging to Hemnes Arms, what was your result?
Corey Jones is the source of the DNA profile obtained.
And did that conclude your results, and that concluded your work in relation to the report on that day that we're discussing here today?
Yes.
And then moving on to your report dated November 4th, 2015, did you receive additional submissions in order to once again perform DNA analysis and also comparison?
Yes.
And did those include, once again, the standard DNA profiles for Nouman Raja and Corey Jones?
Yes.
Did it also include swabs from an iPhone, submission 31A-MB?
Yes.
Swabs from different parts of a Glock 40 caliber Model 27 pistol, submissions 53A through 53F?
Yes.
And then did you compare these to one another to see whether or not you could identify the presence of the DNA of Mr. Corey Jones or Nouman Raja on any of these items?
Yes.
And starting off with submission 31A, swabs from a black cover of an iPhone. Were you able to make any findings or conclusions?
Corey Jones is the source of the DNA profile obtained.
And then as it relates to submission 53B, C, and E, and we'll discuss each one of those parts too. And I'll use as an example, states 43, that's in evidence. So if we're looking at a Glock 40 caliber Model 27 pistol, submission 53B is swabs from the front sights and the rear sights, correct?
Yes.
And then submission 53C are swabs from the grip, and that would be this area here,
Yes.
and the trigger, once again.
Yes.
And then swabs from 53E, which are from the magazine, and then any of the live rounds contained therein, correct?
Yes.
And did you reach similar results for your analysis for all 3 of those submissions?
Yes.
And what were those results?
A DNA profile was obtained and indicates the presence of 2 individuals. The profile was inconclusive for Nouman Raja, and Corey Jones was excluded as a contributor.
So once again, now we're finding that on this firearm, Corey Jones is being excluded from any type of presence for the DNA on those specific swabs.
Correct.
And Nouman Raja is now potentially a contributor, but it's inconclusive. Is that correct?
Yes.
And now we're seeing consistent language between your reports. And is this how you basically relay the information that you've obtained through this type of language consistently?
Yes.
And so let's look at 53A, which are going to be swabs from the actual slide here that would be pulled back to charge the firearm. Did you find any type of profile?
A DNA profile was not obtained.
So you did not find any type of, there was not enough DNA there to actually develop a profile to compare to anybody else?
Correct.
And then on submissions 53D from the magazine and live rounds, and 53F, which are from a holster, what were your results?
53D, the swabs from the magazine and the live rounds. A DNA profile was obtained and indicates the presence of at least 2 individuals. Nouman Raja is the source of the major DNA profile, and Corey Jones is excluded as a contributor to the minor DNA mixture. Corey Jones is excluded as a contributor to the DNA mixture.
So on the magazine and the live rounds, the major profile was Nouman Raja, and Corey Jones was excluded, correct?
Correct.
And then as far as 53F, which are the swabs from a holster,
Nouman Raja is the source of the DNA profile obtained.
and did this conclude what we're discussing in your report dated November 4th, 2015?
Yes.
And then did you also generate another report from December 23rd of 2015?
Yes.
And in that report, did you once again have the standards for Mr. Corey Jones and Mr. Nouman Raja, submissions 8 and 39?
Yes.
Did you also have swabs from different parts of a vehicle, once again, submission 58? And that's going to be broken up into A through H.
Yes.
Also swabs from 2 oil bottles, 56A and 56B.
Yes.
And then once again, did you make comparisons and develop profiles from any potential profiles that you could develop from each one of these items, and then make comparisons to any known standards?
Yes.
So let's begin with submissions 58, 56A and 56B. And these are going to be the 2 oil bottles. What findings did you make as they related to 56A as it related to Nouman Raja?
He was excluded as a contributor.
And then 56A, one of those oil bottles as it related to Corey Jones.
He was inconclusive.
He was I'm sorry?
56A?
Yes, inconclusive?
Yes.
So once again, can't make the call one way or the other whether or not he's included or excluded.
Correct.
And then looking at submission 58C, and these are swabs from a right front door interior handle, correct?
Correct.
Did you obtain a DNA profile?
Yes.
Did it indicate the presence of more than one individual?
Yes, at least 2 individuals.
And what findings did you have?
Corey Jones and Nouman Raja were inconclusive.
So once again, neither one of them could be specifically excluded, and neither one of them could be specifically included.
Correct.
As it relates to the swabs from the glove box interior, did you also develop a DNA profile?
Yes.
Did it also indicate the presence of at least 2 individuals?
Yes.
58D. Did it also include the presence of at least 2 individuals?
Yes.
And once again, what were your results?
Corey Jones and Nouman Raja were inconclusive.
So once again, neither Corey Jones nor Nouman Raja could be excluded, correct?
Correct.
And neither of them could necessarily be included.
Correct.
And then from the glove box exterior swabs, what were your findings? And that's submission 58E.
There was a DNA profile of at least 2 individuals, and Corey Jones was inconclusive and Nouman Raja was excluded.
And so this is more in line with what we had been hearing a lot, which is you have one person, in this case Nouman Raja, excluded,
Correct.
and then one person, Corey Jones, being inconclusive, not knowing whether or not they were included or excluded.
Correct.
And then once you're finished with all of your analysis and all of your comparison and your results, did you return all of the items to evidence so that they could be kept in the appropriate storage to maintain them for potential future testing if we need be?
Yes.
1 second, Your Honor.
Sure.
I have no further questions at this time, Your Honor.
All right. Okay. You are free to go. Watch your step. Drive safely. Could I see the lawyers at the bench? Good news or bad news, depending on your perspective. So we've been talking, while you were in the room there, we had a significant legal issue we had to take up, and we took that up while we were waiting for the witness to make it here. I think there's been some bad situations on 95, so we had some things happen, and it happens. We are still significantly ahead of schedule, but if I don't stay on it, next thing you know, we're back behind schedule. So I know I've been working you hard. We expect, and this is expect, I told you it's a fluid thing, but we expect that the state is going to be done on Monday. And we're going to turn over to the defense side. And we expect them to start, for sure, we're going to have one defense witness on Monday, but I'm not exactly sure how long that their case is going to take, but we're still on time to finish when I promised you. There's going to be some nuances there that I don't want to get into at this juncture, but I'll give you ample heads up. Tomorrow, so today, we're going to be done for the day. You're going to get to go home early. I don't know. I saw somebody smile. Maybe somebody's mad. I don't know. But you're going to get to go home early today, beat the traffic. Then, to keep you informed as best I can, tomorrow, any problem with the same drill as today, except there's going to be one difference. We're going to take witnesses, and we hope that we're going to break at lunchtime for you. And you're going to get to go home. If anybody has work stuff to do, errands to run, tomorrow afternoon's going to be your time to do it. Okay? So you're out of here. Our goal is so we don't hold you up, that you can get out of here and go home and eat or whatever you want to do. So that is the plan right now. Any questions? And then when we break at hopefully at lunch tomorrow, you have the weekend to yourself. Okay? Any questions? Anything? We're working hard. We're working you hard. I'm going to tell you this. Absolute truth. As I told you, I've been here 15 and a half years. You are the most attentive and diligent jury I've ever had. We're going to run out of paper in your legal pads, I think. I'm watching. I don't want you to think I'm staring at you, but I am watching you because I'm supposed to. I'm watching the entire courtroom all the time. You are truly the most diligent jury I've ever had. And I want to tell you how much I appreciate it. I know that this is hard work, and I know this is a lot of pressure, and all of us know that it's a very serious case, but I'm going to just keep thanking you because I know sitting in your shoes is not easy. So, with that being said, don't talk about the case. No research, Google, Facebook, Twitter, any issues. You got to be honest with me and tell me about it. And I hope that I see you tomorrow morning at the same drill. Turn your pads upside down. We're all good, right, guys? Just follow the deputies. They'll take care of you. And don't rush. Don't rush. Get yourself organized and just watch your step. And just so you guys know, and I'll just tell you, I usually don't ask, but I'm going to tell you now, and then if you have some comment about it, I hold back on telling them generally for a while that somebody's an alternate juror. I hold back. But I started a process after I had an alternate go crazy on me about 14 years ago, went crazy when they got excused from the jury. They were so angry that I softened the blow. And this is how I do it, and unless I hear otherwise. I've never asked the lawyers for permission, but I want to treat this case specially. I usually tell them, listen, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I just want you to know that 4 of you are alternate jurors. I don't tell you who you are. There are some studies that show if you know you're the alternate ahead of time, you don't pay as close attention. So I'm not going to tell you who you are. And I'm going to keep you to the very bitter end until I have the jurors back in the jury room safely deliberating the case. Because that's the second reason I tell you watch your step. I had a jury where one of the jurors fell out of the jury box and got hurt. I had to take him away in an ambulance. So that's the story I plan on telling, but I don't plan on telling until after the weekend. But I need to start softening that blow for these 4 people who, maybe these 4 people are going to go, I'm out of here and I'm very happy. But I had the last murder case I had a couple weeks ago, the alternate was very saddened, which surprised me. And she was, why didn't they pick me? I said, you were picked, but you just happened to be the alternate. But she was very upset. And so, any comments, anything I need to know about? Okay, so we're, from my understanding, we've taken care of any lingering legal issues right now, right?
Yes, sir.
And then we'll break for the evening. Oh, Cox is saying something. Go ahead, talk. It's no problem.
Yes, Your Honor. I did want to just bring one thing to the court's attention, and it's in relation to the defense expert, Dr. Trumpeter. I think that through our discussions and through some of the things that happened yesterday, Your Honor, in court, we are going to be seeking to either limit some of that testimony and perhaps ask Your Honor to allow the defense to proffer it, because there are some questions about exactly what he's going to be testifying to and if all of it is admissible and should be relevant to this case. And I can put it on the record now. If Your Honor would like me to do that, or wait until tomorrow, or if you want us to formally file something, we can.
Well, have you guys talked first
With the defense?
about your issue?
We have not. We
Okay.
have not.
So then I'm going to ask you to just talk first. Maybe it's something specific. Who is he and what does he do?
He is a psychologist, and my understanding is that he did not interview this defendant and stated that he had no specific opinions about whether he himself experienced any memory or perception or distortions during or after the shooting incident. He then went on to say that he cannot offer any opinions if he's never interviewed an individual. And then he went on to say something a little bit different in his deposition, indicating that if he were asked certain questions about Mr. Raja, specifically that he would offer opinions about that. So I'm a little confused, and in light of Your Honor's ruling yesterday regarding Sergeant Karpinski not being able to go down the list of those discrepancies, and Your Honor specifically said that it's because he would be commenting on the witness's credibility. I think we're a little...
Well, I went right, I started researching just to refresh my recollection. I mean, Earhart was directly on point on that issue.
Well, we believe that that is what this testimony would be. It's not specific to Raja, Defendant Raja, and what happened to him on that day. It's general opinions about memory, perception after a shooting or deadly shooting incident, I think is what it was referred to. So we're just trying to understand, and so that we're prepared, how this testimony will be relevant, how it's going to relate to the issues in this case, and whether or not it would be a comment on his credibility or improperly bolstering the statement that was given during the walkthrough. So right now, I mean, there are a lot of questions that we have about Dr. Trumpeter's testimony, and I wanted to bring it to the court's attention because we may decide that we want to file something to either exclude it or limit it, or at the very least, Judge, have a proffer so that we all know, you know, what he's expected to state to the...
You did depose him, right?
We did, and that's the reason for some of the questions, especially, like I said, after what happened yesterday with Sergeant Karpinski. We were a little, you know, kind of wondering, okay, well, if Sergeant Karpinski was not able to explain or at least talk about those discrepancies and inconsistencies, then how then would this expert be permitted to come in and lay out that there were inconsistencies and then go a step further and explain them away, or offer, you know, some type of science, as he called it, to explain them away?
Okay. Mr. Richardson?
Yes, Your Honor. The defense did, the state did say we might have some issues with Dr. Trumpeter's testimony, but not as specific as what was discussed. And I think we can discuss it.
Okay.
And we'll get back to you on that. But I think,
I appreciate that.
sure, we should discuss it and advise them as to what he's going to testify to and what he's not going to testify to.
Thank you.
Fair enough. Thanks. And then I think that puts us in recess, and we'll start back tomorrow, the kind of usual drill. Great. Have a good night to both sides.
Thank you, Judge. See you in the morning.
8:20, 8:25, right?